Thanks, everyone. I'd like to open tonight's Community and Cultural Committee meeting. It's Monday, the 20th of November at 6:01 p.m. I'd like to start off by reading the advice regarding recording and webcasting of the meeting. This committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will also be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I've received none. None received. That brings us to apologies. We've received one. Two. Sorry, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee receive, note and accept the apology of Councillors Vanderven and King and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to move the minutes of the Community and Cultural Committee meeting held on Monday, the 16th of October at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, would you like to speak to those minutes?
No, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have no speakers for or against, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Matters arising from the minutes, I have none. Reports from committees and working parties, I have none. That brings us to officers' reports for consideration. Thank you. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to move the committee recommends to Council that Council A note this report, B continue the existing informal support for homelessness, C develop a prevention of homelessness strategy in conjunction with the social plan, and D research affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Happy to second the motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, would you like to open debate on this item?
Just briefly to make a comment, Madam Chair. This was an extensive report, and I note that there were a lot of references made to other national reports and state reports that were available, which provides an accurate assessment of what's happening across this country. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that as a community and as a council, we need to provide support to every level of the community, and homelessness is a outcome of a lot of symptomatic behaviour, and it's outlined in this report. But I think it's also important to understand that there was a question asked of me, why is it the responsibility of council to consider homelessness? Well, the issue or the response to that is we have a responsibility to plan and provide affordable housing where possible and provide positive social outcomes for our community, because at any point anyone living in their own home at the moment, their child or themselves could be subjected to something like this if the social outcomes of their life determined it. So I think it's important that we embrace this opportunity and provide a strategy and provide the information and the support to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I have a speaker for Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add one point, because quite often the profile of homeless people is assumed to be a certain way, but evidence we've got recently shows that the number of older women becoming homeless is increasing dramatically, and any strategies that we adopt need to take that factor into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no other councillors wishing to speak. If I might add my own comments from the chair, it's certainly distressing to read in the report that many of our homelessness support services, such as the Betty's Place Refuge, are often at capacity. This is obviously a significant issue affecting our community, and I look forward to hearing about the progress from our staff on the prevention of homelessness strategy, as well as their research on affordable housing. Thanks. Councillor Mack, would you like to close debate?
No, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Brings us to officers' reports for noting. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee recommends to council that the council receive and note the Mama Annual Report 2016-17 and B, acknowledge the support and efforts of the Advisory Committee, volunteers, members of Mama Foundation, sponsors, donors, funding bodies and supporters.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before you open debate, Councillor Thurley, I have a question from another councillor. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. I have a question through you, Madam Chair, to the most appropriate member of staff through the General Manager. The report contains a figure which is the cost of mama for the previous 12 months. Is that figure less, is it a net figure, less any income that mama has produced? And what forms of income, if any, does mama produce for council and ratepayers?
Mr. Zegnich. Mr. Jenkins.
Through you, Madam Chair. The figure that's mentioned in the council report is net operational result of $1.130, $671, so 1.1 million roughly, which is the net cost to council of the operation of mama. In the annual report, it shows that the overall income and expenditure for that facility is 1.5 million. The annual report is designed as a report that's given to external funding bodies, which shows the whole mix of income, including council's contribution to the running of mama. So there's $437,000 that comes from other sources other than council funds. That's either income from the shop, income from educational programs, income from grants, income from philanthropy and the like.
Additional, if I may.
Follow-up question, Councillor
Cameron.
That's what I said.
Sorry. Is that so? Is it possible to isolate the grant figure alone? What proportion of that income might be grants? If you have it readily available, that's fine. Don't waste time otherwise. If you want to give it on notice, that's fine too.
In the annual, through you, Madam Chair, in the annual report, it indicates that 71,000 is bequests, special funds, grants, and other contributions. And certainly in the last financial year, the grant funding we got from the New South Wales government was around $35,000. We've been notified for this coming year that it's now $70,000, so we've managed to double that, but that won't show up until this year's financial statements.
All right, thank you for a very comprehensive answer.
I'll now move back to Councillor Thurley to open debate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's a very comprehensive report, and I had the pleasure of going to the meeting the other day, the advisory committee. I think a few important facts should come out of this report. According to the tally, there were 75,000 visitors to the gallery, 25,000 of whom were out of region. That means we're bringing significant money. I think some 6,000 of those were overnight stays as well. Something like 436 public and education programs, and over almost 2,500 students went through this facility. Yes, it costs the community money, but so does the Botanic Gardens, so do our sports fields. It's what a well-rounded and full city deserves to have. The other thing that I would like to say is I'd congratulate the staff and those others involved in achieving the Archibald Prize exhibition, which will open in just a couple of weeks' time. It's a big coup for us, and once again will bring quite a lot of people into this city. So I commend the staff and those involved with mama.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no other councillors wishing to speak, but I have another question from Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the most appropriate member of staff, we often hear that, and understandably so and reasonably so, that mama costs a lot of money, but so do sporting fields and botanical gardens and swimming pools, God knows. Just as a matter of interest, do you know offhand how much it costs the city each year to maintain the botanical gardens, roughly?
Mr. Jenkins.
Through you, Madam Chair, no, I don't offhand. I used to, but it's not in my mind at the moment, so I'd have to get that figure to you.
And if you could, also the cost in total of our various sporting fields, that would be an interesting.
Yes. Thank you. I will supply that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have another speaker for the motion, Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. looking at this report and certainly understanding the history of Mama and being part of the council that during the 4 years that built Mama, I think it's important to understand, and my personal view is that Mama has come into its own in the last 3 to 4 years as a physical structure, and if eventually it'll be embedded in our community. But I think, like the more successful regional galleries that we seem to measure our success on, which one would come to mind would be Bendigo. Whilst I was at a foundation dinner the other month, the commentary was about you need to crawl before you can walk. And I think ultimately Mama is getting up on its legs, and I think eventually with the Archibalds coming to town and other great exhibitions, they will eventually walk and they'll start to run. But I think to compare these facilities with like for like with botanical gardens or certainly sporting fields can be a bit of a misnomer, given that it's a totally different process and totally different offering. But I think we need to have that balance. I agree with Councillor Thurl. We need to have that balance in our community where it's not all about one particular thing. And I think it's about that rich tapestry and that culture that we have here in Albury and Wodonga, that it basically attracts tourists and attracts visitors and residents to our community. So I commend the report, and I really, really wish the crew at Mama a lot of success in the future, and I think that will just come as a matter of process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I have a speaker against the motion, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you.
I thought he could speak.
Oh, I can.
He spoke at planning development. He can't vote. He can speak.
Sorry. Good. Any further advice? Right. Good. Okay. Thank you. The look, my position on this has been, well, I believe it's been clear over the years, but I think people sometimes misunderstand me, and I just want to take this opportunity to make clear what my position was and is on Mama. I believe that this city certainly should have built Mama, but not at the time we built it. I believe we should have waited until we had the third leg of the proposed tripartite funding from the state government, instead of shouldering the burden ourselves and in conjunction with the federal government, the then federal Labor government. But we chose not to do that, and I respect the majority view, and the majority decision was that we didn't do that. We went ahead and built it before we had any state funding or significant state funding. And we also had a pleasing amount of philanthropy, or if that's the correct pronunciation, I doubt it is. Philanthropic. I'll leave that to better pronunciators than myself. But we had a pleasing amount, more than I imagined we would get. So that ameliorated the effect of the state government not contributing in any significant way to the project. But people sometimes say, oh, you must hate art. It's not so. I used to go regularly to the old art gallery, and I particularly enjoyed the Russell Drysdale collection that was there. I have my own form of protest about what was done, but I'll leave that at that. I just want people to understand that I think we should have built an art gallery, but perhaps about now we should be starting to build it with tripartite funding. And indeed, it's ironic that the state government now has available a large tranche of funding for those sort of projects at the moment, which it's offering. So it's a pity, but timing is everything in boxing and sometimes in local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Thorley, would you like to close debate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not quite sure where to go to after that. The boxing analogy leaves me quite cold. It is a world-class facility, and the standard of exhibitions is getting better and better. I actually went there for the opening of the Landmark exhibition the other day, and some works in our collection that have not been shown for a long time were out on display. We had a brilliant work by Bill Henson and a Tom Roberts painting, which are world-class works of art. This is a wonderful facility for the community and showcases Albury and gives people more reasons to come here to this place. And I commend the staff for the work they've done.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Delegates' reports for noting, I have none. Councillors, is there any notice of urgent business? And there are no confidential matters tonight, so I'll close the meeting at 6:15 p.m. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, and I declare open the Finance and Administration Committee meeting for Monday the 20th of November. I need to read this advice about recording and streaming. This committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting, that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, there are none. Thank you. Apologies. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. To receive and note and accept the apologies of Councillors Van der Ven and King and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Chair.
I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 4 is confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Noting, however, I was not at this meeting, I would still like to move that we receive and note and that the minutes be confirmed from the meeting of 18 September 2017.
Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Chair.
Do you wish to open any debate on the matter? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. I have no indication of matters arising for the minutes, so I'll move on to FAC 6, reports of minutes, committees and working parties. There are none. FAC 7, officers' reports for consideration. 7.1, Saturday morning councillor interview review. I need a mover. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Happy to move the committee recommends to Council that Council discontinue the Saturday morning councillor interview process and implement the additional actions identified in option 3 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, do you wish to open debate?
Just briefly, Mr Chair, I think with the report clearly outlines how we have moved on, certainly as a community, in terms of the way we communicate and the way we access councillors and access council information. I think clearly with the figures that are demonstrated in this report, the process of councillor interviews over the journey have either declined, gone up or down, or none at all. But I think the cost to advertise this process and the cost to the ratepayers far outweighs the outcomes. And I think if anyone in the committee wants to meet with any councillor in this chamber, they are more than open and available to meet with those people at any time during the week. So I think we've moved on. There's a lot of communication strategies that are currently used with community forums and other methods that are used right across our directorate. So I think this report needs to be commended. I encourage councillors to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Cameron to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm in favour of retaining the Saturday morning interviews. I think back to early in the last term of council when I received a visit from the East, or from the Murray Magpies, as they are now, football club and New City Cricket Club, to outline their appalling facilities that they at that time had, the worst in the league and the worst in Albury, nearly, or probably very likely the worst in Albury. And it was the forum of the Saturday morning interviews that enabled them to start the ball rolling, and the work that I did with the Mayor and other councillors later following that point to get it to where it is today, where they enjoy very good facilities out at Urana Road there. Now, I'm not sure that ever would have happened if we weren't having Saturday morning interviews. And, not everybody is articulate as some people in our community. A lot of people are shy. Some people are inarticulate. It is quite pleasant for some people, or it encourages some people, if they can approach council or an individual councillor in a quiet, private setting and have a talk, have a casual chat. So I think there's value in them and I'd like to retain them. Thank you.
Councillor Comm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To speak for this motion, I'm really pleased that Council is modernising its approach to communicating with residents. We've already had the new AlburyCity Facebook page launch with great success, and I think that being able to organise interviews at a time that suits people is far more flexible. It makes us more accessible to the community rather than less. In the year or so since I've been elected, I have not once turned down an invitation to meet with someone from the community when they've contacted me, and I hope that continues for the rest of the time of this council.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, you speak against the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've only done one Saturday morning interview. Might add that was highly successful, with the most number of interviewees recorded on the document we're reading today. I'm sure that was nothing to do with me. Look, I tend to echo Councillor Cameron's comments that not everyone in our community is able to utilise what is being proposed as an alternative to the face-to-face interview. For example, if a member of the community wants to phone or email me, then they need to have the nous to get onto the AlburyCity website and then navigate to the council section and then the councillor section and then find me, and then there's my email address and phone number. Some elderly people may not even have a computer or not know how to use it, but they do get the Border Mail, which is where the interviews were advertised. I don't use Facebook. I've never been on the AlburyCity Council Facebook page, so it doesn't help me. I'm sure it doesn't help a lot of other people. I think that all of the other options like telephoning and emailing are great and they should be there, but I don't see why you have to get rid of the interview completely and replace it with these more modern, newfangled techniques of communication. Thank you.
I have a question from Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the General Manager or the most relevant member of staff. My understanding is that it would be possible for people to phone or call into the council chambers and request an interview with a councillor at any time, and that the staff would arrange such said meeting at the request of any resident. Would that be correct, Mr. General Manager?
Thanks for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct, Councillor Glacken, and obviously we'd be liaising with the concerned councillor to ensure that that's possible at the requested time.
Thank you.
I'd just like to make a couple of remarks from the Chair. I am speaking in favour of the motion. There are a very small number of people in the community who have used the service in the 5 years that I've been on council. And there are numerous other ways for people to get in touch. And in fact, I'm regularly contacted by my personal phone, my house phone, the council phone, and by council email. I've never yet heard a person say to me that it's impossible to talk to anyone and impossible to get a meeting to discuss matters. So I think this is a more efficient way. It does save the council the cost of that little anonymous ad that appears up the back of the Border Mail that very few people see. And I think that this is something that's long overdue for change, so I would be voting in favour of the motion. Councillor Mack, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say that we are not accommodating the needs of our community in terms of not being available for interviews on Saturday morning. I think only just recently, as 4 o'clock this afternoon, myself and 3 other councillors met with a concerned group in relation to a planning issue, and I think they got more out of that discussion from the 4 of us than they would from one single councillor, because yet again, with the Saturday morning interviews, it's just a point of reference for the councillor taking the interview to provide the details to the staff to get a response to go back to the people with that response. At least this way we are actually actively listening and working with the issues on a daily basis. And I think the councillors of today need to be prepared to work 7 days, 24/7 a week, and understand that that's what the community expect, because that's the nature of the business and social processes that they adopt. To go back to Saturday morning or remain with Saturday morning interviews, I think is a bygone issue of the past, and certainly it's a 9 to 5 day week. We're up to 7 days a week. We're working 24/7. I think we should be available when the committee want access. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. I'll move on to 7.2, Draft September Quarter Budget Review. And I need a mover. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm just finding my page with the recommendation. I'd like to move the recommendation that the committee recommends to Council that Council A, receive and adopt the revised budget estimates for the 2017-18 financial year. B, note the supplementary reports including the consultancy and legal expenditure and contract expenditure listing. C, authorise the General Manager to make application to the New South Wales Treasury Corporation for the budgeted credit FONSIA loan funding of up to $3.5 million. D, further assess the required amount of loan funding to be drawn down by 30 June 2018 as part of the December quarter budget review. And E, authorise the General Manager to approve the fixed interest rate period that represents best value for money. Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Chair.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Mack.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. Just in relation to the item in relation to JC King Park, it's mentioned in the report. I'm just wanting an update as to what the issues are with the funding there, because my understanding was that the funding was squared away and that they were ready to go. Is there something that we need to understand? Because it says that in the spreadsheet, it says something about accessing further funding has delayed the start of the works. Thank you.
Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Chair, I'll just find the appropriate report and page. Through you, Mr Chair, my understanding is the wording there reflects the fact that the project actually commenced the previous budget year, and they weren't actually able to use that grant funding they had got in the previous financial year because the project wasn't ready to commence. It's now ready to commence, as in there's an approved development application, and we're about to go to tender for it in the next weeks. So.
I have no other questions or comments, so Councillor Glacken, do you wish to open the debate?
No, Mr Chair, because it's only the first quarter, noting some carryover and the fact that there's been some FAGS grants complications as well, but the staff are working through that. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against, the motion is carried. Moving on to officers' reports for noting. 8.1 is the AlburyCity 2016-17 annual report. And I need a mover. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Very happy to move the recommendation of the committee to Council, that Council receive and note the 2016-17 annual report. Thank you, Mr Chair.
And Councillor Mack.
Happy to second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Chair. 2016-17 was a fantastic year for Council because we achieved some significant milestones. The Blewett Award, the finances were very positive. The staff achieved a number of significant savings, including significant work with the ongoing efficiency reviews that were commenced some years ago but have continued to be very productive. There was significant investment, including capital investment for ongoing, that would produce ongoing savings regards infrastructure, including particularly solar-related infrastructure. And so it was all round, it was a very good year, and Council and the staff need to be very proud of that work and the achievements made during that year. The report looks great. It's nice to have such a positive outcome. Thank you, Mr Chair.
I have no other speakers or questions, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 8.2, investment balances, October 2017. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I recommend that the council recommends to council that the committee recommends to council that council receive and note the investment balance report for the month of October 2017. I was having trouble reading the screen.
Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Very briefly, the investment balance looks very healthy again. Given the low interest rates across the investment world, I think we're doing pretty well. Thank you very much.
I have no other questions or comments, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 8.3, corporate health indicators, September 2017. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Happy to move that committee recommends to council that council receive and note the September 2017 corporate health indicators report.
And Councillor Stutchbury.
I'd like to second that, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I think it's consistent with the annual report and certainly the financial report that this particular, the indicators, corporate indicators, is very strong. There's been an increase in our funding in terms of return, $22 million of the cash position. I think there's been some level of decrease, which has been minor. I think in general, the organisation is travelling pretty well at this point, and I think the staff should be congratulated. Thank you.
And I guess staff would be disappointed if I didn't add my little bit about occupational health and safety. And once again, the result is good. A little minor hiccup with some old injuries that have come back to haunt us, but in general, the progress is solid and steady and something that I commend the staff. So I have no other questions or comments, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 8.4, delivery program quarterly progress report, September 2017. And I need a mover. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It is with great pleasure that I move that the committee recommends to council that council receive and note the delivery program quarterly progress report for September 2017. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
It's with even greater pleasure that I second it, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, and thank you, Mr Chair.
I have no questions or comments, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. I have no delegates' reports, no notice of urgent business, and I'm not aware of any confidential matters, so I'll declare the meeting closed at 6:33. Thank you, councillors.